virtually?
So join the meeting yet, but we do have a quorum, and it is 4:30. So Fernando, whenever, and there's Tim. He's coming in now, so we're good to go live.
Yep, we're good.
Okay, and Reggie, we're good to start the meeting.
All right, good deal. Thank you. We'll do a call to order. Good afternoon, folks. This is Reggie Skinner, Chair of the Apex Planning Board. Attendance at today's meeting will be taken by roll call. When I say your name, please respond. Tina Sherman.
Here.
Tim Royal.
Here.
Keith Braswell.
Here.
Brian Akers.
Here.
Elaine Boyle.
Here.
Jeff Hastings.
Here.
Stephen Rhodes.
Here.
All right, thank you. Before I review how this remote meeting will proceed, I would like to ask Keith Braswell to provide an invocation. Keith, we cannot hear you.
Maybe I should unmute before the prayer, huh? Okay, let's start over, guys. Please bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we would like to thank you for this day in this great town. Please lead, guide, and direct us today. These things we ask in your name. Amen.
Amen. Now I'll ask you to all please stand as we recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All participants will be muted initially. Roll call for the voting on action items will be conducted by calling out the name of each planning board member. To ask a question or make a comment, you can click to unmute yourself. Please remember to mute yourself once you're done speaking. If disruptions occur either via video feed or audio or phone, staff will first mute all of us, and then at my direction as chair, an attendee with disruption audio will be muted by staff. While presentations are occurring, we'll mute ourselves and our lines so that the presenter has clean audio. When we get to the questions and discussion points, I will indicate that the floor is open for any comments and discussions. At any time, you can raise your hand or unmute yourself to ask a question or to make a comment. The chat box should not be used to discuss any items during this meeting because we need to be able to take technical difficulties with staff. Please state your name when you unmute before you make a comment or ask a question so that the group knows who is speaking and the minutes can be documented correctly. If a voting member of the board logs off, we'll pause briefly to allow time for he or her to reestablish connection, to avoid having to repeat any information. Any questions from the board members? All right. Message to the public attendees. There have been written public comments for this meeting were allowed to be submitted via email, mail, or delivery up to 24 hours prior to the start of the meeting. Diane, do we have any items of information today?
Yes, good afternoon. So I just wanted to mention both this month and next month, we have a very short turnaround between planning board and town council due to the fact that the second Monday and the fourth Tuesday are only a week apart. So Reggie, we do need to get the planning board reports to town council signed tonight and sent back. I will get them to you immediately following the meeting. The same thing will happen next month. And so just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware.
Thank you, Diane. Now for the public comment period. For any non-public hearing item, including new business items that appear in this agenda, staff, do we have any public comments for the public comment period?
None were received.
All right. We'll now move on to consent item number 1. Item number 1 is the minutes from January 10th, 2022 regular meeting. Discussion and a possible motion about these minutes.
Mrs. Tina, I move to approve the minutes.
We have a motion from Tina. Do we have a second?
This is Elaine, I second.
A second from Elaine. Thank you. All in favor? Reggie Skinner? Yes. Tina Sherman?
Yes.
Tim Royal?
Yes.
Keith Braswell?
Yes.
Ryan Akers?
Yes.
Elaine Boyle?
Yes.
Stephen Rhodes?
Yes.
Thank you. We'll now move on to the public hearings. Item number 1, Sarah Van Every, Senior Planner, is going to discuss regarding case number 21 CZ14, the Holland Road Mixed Use Assembly.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Sarah Van Every, Senior Planner here with the Town of Apex. And I do have a rezoning case 21CZ14. Are y'all able to see everything up on the screen? Awesome. Great. Thank you. So I'm going to start with video. If for any reason we seem to be hitting any glitches, I'll turn my camera off. So again, this is, case 21CZ14 Holland Road Mixed Use Assembly Pod. It's located here in this general vicinity. It's at the intersection of Hume Olive, Old US 1, and Holland Road. Zoom in here to the subject properties. This here is the area that we're looking at. This is over 28.5 acres. As you can see, most of the subject site is generally wooded. There are a few residential structures and related outbuildings on site. Over here to the north, we have Bella Casa. We have some single family residential over here to the west, as well as over here to the east. Along the south here, we have a mix of uses, some non-residential and residential uses. We're going to go to the zoning. The subject sites are currently zoned rural residential. They are surrounded by other rural residential zoning districts. There is medium density conditional zoning here to the north. There's a mix of zoning here representative of the mix of uses there. There's MORR, Tech Flex, and a B1 conditional zoning, as well as the rural residential. The applicant conducted a neighborhood meeting on April 27th, 2021. That meeting report is in your packet. So the proposed zoning is a planned unit development conditional zoning. The 2045 land use map designates the subject properties as medium density residential and a medium high density residential. There's just a portion over here in this general area, as well as commercial services. The proposed rezoning to planned unit conditional zoning is generally consistent with those land use map designations. The proposed rezoning includes a mix of residential uses and commercial uses if the properties are rezoned as proposed. The 2045 land use map would automatically be amended to remove the medium high density residential area that was over here, expand the medium density residential area, and reduce the commercial services area per state statutes. Let's see here. Also, I wanted to let you know we have, since the packets went out, we had a Wake County Public School System letter of impact that was included in your packet. In that meantime, we also had another letter of impact for another rezoning in the area, more recent, that had a different statement. So we reached back out to Wake County Public Schools at the end of last week, again, after you would have gotten your packet, and we did have an update for them. So the information in your packet is going to change a little bit, and I apologize. I should have made a slide up here for you, and I hindsight thought of it over the weekend, totally forgot. But I'll read to you what they said, and that was that we received a letter of impact from Wake County Public School System for this rezoning. That letter is included in your report packet. However, so it indicates that elementary, middle, and high schools within the current assignment area for this rezoning and development are anticipated to have insufficient capacity for future students, and transportation to schools outside of the current assignment area should be anticipated. This all remains the same. The information that is changing is that school expansion or construction within the next 5 years is anticipated to address concerns. So that is the difference, is that that recommendation has changed. So I'll bring us back to a survey. Yes.
Sarah, hi. I'm sorry. This is Tina Sherman. I don't know the best way to receive that information. I understand that this came in late. I don't know if it's possible to. I would like to see the letter. So I don't know if it's possible to scan it, include it as a part of this presentation at this point, or if we can get it by email, or sort of what's the best way. But I would love to see it. I'm having I just want to physically see what it says.
Sure. So it's that last sentence that's changed, where it previously said that the checked boxes at the end where it says not anticipated to address concerns, is that it's no longer a not. It's that it is anticipated that future construction will provide some relief.
Yes, that's true for elementary and high. And Tina, this is Amanda. I will email that letter to all planning boards so that you have it.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Amanda.
Yes, thank you very much, Amanda. All right, so that was the existing. We're gonna move on to permitted uses. So the full listing of all the permitted uses are located in your staff report. So there is a mix of residential and non-residential. So the residential uses are here in this area, the yellow and orange, the non-residential uses in this red. The residential uses include both single family, townhouse, accessory apartment, greenway, recreation facility. Those full listings are in there. As far as the non-residential uses, a lot of these are neighborhood level commercial uses. They include youth and day camps, restaurants, a medical dental office, business professional, bookstore, convenience store with gas sales, grocery, etc. The full listing is located in the staff report. The PD plan proposes an overall maximum residential density of 6 dwelling units per acre and a maximum of 76,500 square feet of non-residential, including 4 out parcels and a convenience store with no more than 10 fueling stations in the non-residential section. So again, we're looking here. So the residential units, overall residential development shall not exceed 110 dwelling units with a minimum of 10 single-family detached dwelling units and the remainder comprised of townhomes. Excuse me, 1 second. Sorry about that. Additional design controls, we're looking at a maximum building height for single family detached is 36 feet, townhouses 40 feet, non-residential 50 feet. Single family minimum lot size standards are 6,000 square feet with a lot width, minimum lot width of 60 feet. For setbacks, we're looking at fairly traditional setbacks for single family and townhouse. And non-residential has 20-foot 20-foot setbacks all around. And we have our standard setbacks from buildings and parking areas from the buffers and RCA. Which brings us to buffers. So there is a chart there in your staff report of required buffers and proposed buffers. So for the residential area, and we'll get, there's more in the zoning conditions, so we'll get there into some of the language in regards to the different buffer widths that you'll see up here. But we're looking at either a 20-foot type A or type B or 30-foot type A along the north here. For Holland Road, they have proposed along the residential portion here a 20-foot type B buffer. And then this western boundary here is a 10-foot type B buffer. The non-residential buffers, Holland Road and Old US 1 have a 20-foot type E proposed buffer. The thoroughfare street front required buffer is 30-foot type E. Hume Olive Road does have the 30-foot type E. Along here, and there is a zoning condition, so we'll get to this one a touch later. They are proposing a 10-foot type B buffer along here, although no buffer would be required if a public street or private driveway straddles or is located along the property line between these parcels right here. The maximum built upon area is 70% for non-residential and 60% for residential development. Next, we will move to the proposed RCA for the project. They're proposing a 25% RCA for the non-residential portion of the development and are requesting an RCA reduction to a 25% minimum from the 30% minimum for the, oops, sorry, I pointed to the wrong thing, said the right thing. So requesting an RCA reduction to 25% minimum from the 30% minimum for the single family attached and a 25% RCA for the non-residential portion. Development shall not be subject to additional RCA requirement for mass grading of single-family detached lots. That is also in the proposed zoning conditions, as well as off-site RCA may be used to comply with the approved RCA standards as outlined in section 8.1. In response to, and this is what I had alluded to earlier, in response to a request from adjacent Bella Casa property owners, the buffer along the northern boundary may be cleared and replanted per previous pod text conditions and shall count as resource conservation area for the development. So per UDO standards, any disturbance in any area, regardless of vegetation, cannot count towards RCA and future plans. So this is what they are seeking a relief from, is to go in and disturb the vegetation and plant it to an opacity that's been worked out with the neighbors, and that's preferred, so that even though that disturbed area will result in a greater vegetation than we would get if we just left it as RCA and left it alone. It's I guess has some scrappy vegetation in it, if you will. And then also, and lastly, for RCA conditions is that the overhead Duke Energy electric line and easements running along Hume Olive Road, Old US 1, and Holland Road shall be counted toward the required RCA and buffer standards. So again, when this would come to site plan or subdivision plan, any of this area along here, along the road frontage, if it was included in a private easement, which would be Duke, then it wouldn't be allowed to count for buffer and RCA, and then would further push that buffer back. So that's what that proposed zoning condition is in regard to. Next, I'll just go over a list of some of the zoning conditions that are proposed. The full listing is in your report. It is a maximum of 100 townhome dwellings shall be permitted. A minimum of 10 single-family detached dwellings shall be permitted. Maximum of 76,500 square feet of commercial retail uses, inclusive of up to 4 non-residential outparcels and a convenience store with up to 10 fueling stations. All single-family detached and non-residential buildings shall provide solar conduit for rooftop solar panels. No covenant shall be placed on property which prohibits accessory apartments as a use. The uses, restaurant, drive-through, and convenience store with gas sales shall not be permitted within 100 feet of residential properties within the development. A 20-foot landscape easement shall be provided between the commercial retail area and the residential area. So along here, this area shall be landscaped to a type A buffer standard with a berm as permitted by the UDO. And so as we were talking about earlier, is a type A buffer shall be provided along the northern boundary, and shall be any disturbance there will be allowed to count toward RCA. There are also several of the EAB condition recommendations that have been added. There is a full listing. They do include things such as increased signage, increased planting diversity. That includes pollinator friendly, bird friendly, native species. There's a minimum of 3 pet waste stations, some increased SEM treatments and lighting treatments. Again, full listing included in the staff report. And so this site will be extending public utilities to the site. And we'll go over the elevations here quickly. There is the full listing of architectural standards for both non-residential and residential in the staff report. They're all pretty typical. There's nothing really that stands out that's unique and different. So these are the non-residential elevations. Here's a sampling of the single family. And the townhouse elevations. Come back to that one in a second. All right. Affordable housing. The applicant has met with staff, including meeting with CJ to discuss possible options to contribute to affordable housing. At this point in the process, the applicant has not provided a zoning condition related to affordable housing, but is considering some of the suggestions offered by staff. And let's see, we will now get into transportation. So there's a full listing in your staff report from the TIA and the recommendations that have come out from that and that are included as zoning conditions and that are supported by staff and by DOT. So real quickly, I'll address them on here, and then I'll go to the graphic from the TIA as well. So as you can see here, we have potential access points to provide connectivity to the west, as well as to the west, or to the west via the north, however you want to look at this one. But essentially to provide connectivity to these parcels over here. There is a full movement access here that sits about 600 feet from this intersection. Hume Olive Road, the zoning conditions, and everything you see on the plans here are consistent with the transportation plan in that this accounts for the 80-foot right-of-way with a 10-foot side path on the north side of Hume Olive. Along Old US 1, we have a right-in, right-out access point here. There is a 110-foot right-of-way width, 5-foot sidewalk, and 6-foot paved shoulder to further support and facilitate future bike lane along here. And here along Holland, this is the right in, right out. It's about 350 feet from this intersection. This is the full movement access point. That's about 950 feet from this intersection. This also provides for the 80-foot right-of-way and 5-foot sidewalk along Holland Road. The Holland Friendship intersection realignment that is on our transportation plan. There's currently no programming, no timing for when that realignment will happen. But this plan does not impact that land use. So there's everything that they're doing here along Holland Road is consistent with our transportation plan. So I'm also going to, and then just to round off, we also have an existing stub street here that will provide connectivity consistent with the UDO to the development here. So I'll go back to the image from the TIA that I had mentioned. This goes over some of the improvements. What you see with the hollowed out arrows with the black tips, those are that's the recommended laneage. So this is Holland Road here. This is that full movement access point. This is the right in, right out. This is Old US 1, right in, right out. And then this is Hume Olive Road with that full movement access here. This is Friendship Road here. And this does show the left turn lanes that will be put in with Pleasant Park. Don't have updated timing on when those will be installed. They are moving slow, as I believe they're tied to the improvements in the park, and that's just all, I guess, moving a little slow. So I don't have a time essentially for this, but staff is recommending an extended storage lane for that left turn lane. And again, this is all, this is essentially the graphic of all the text that's included in your staff report of all the transportation improvements. Which then brings us to the Environmental Advisory Board. They had a pre-application with them back on April 15th, 2021. There were several zoning conditions suggested by the EAB. That full listing is included in your staff report. As I noted, almost all of the suggested conditions have been incorporated into the PUD zoning text and conditions. Yeah. The project also was reviewed by the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Advisory Commission. At their June 30th, 2021 meeting, the commission made a unanimous recommendation for fee in lieu at that time. Planning staff recommends denial of the rezoning 21 CZ14 Holland Road Mixed Use Assembly Pod based on the reduction of several perimeter buffers and the lack of a commitment to provide affordable housing. The proposed reduction in certain buffers along Holland Road and Old US 1 highway is not typical of other similar PUD projects. Staff can only support the reduced buffer widths and recommended approval of the rezoning if a zoning condition is offered that provides significant affordable housing within the development. Apologize, I should have noted at the beginning, staff has been working with the applicant and suggesting that since their pre-application meeting with staff prior to submitting this petition, that affordable housing be addressed in this PUD. So to the analysis, the 2045 land use map designates the site as medium density residential, medium high density residential, and commercial services. The proposed PUD is generally consistent with that land use classification. The proposed rezoning includes a mix of residential uses and commercial uses. If the properties are rezoned as proposed, the 2045 land use map will automatically be amended to remove the medium high density residential area, expand the medium residential area and reduce the commercial services area per state statute. While the petition does provide a transition between housing types and lower and higher residential densities, provides for a mix of neighborhood level non-residential uses to develop along the 3 thoroughfares and serve the existing development with neighborhood services, and provides pedestrian accommodations, the petition as presented is not reasonable in that it lacks adequate buffers between future development and existing sites, proposes reduced street front buffers along 2 of the 3 thoroughfares, and does not address consistency with the town's adopted affordable housing plan. Therefore, the petition as presented is not reasonable and is not in the public interest. I will be happy to answer any questions you have at this time. The applicant is here, and I know we also have Russell on deck should you have any traffic engineering questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Does the applicant want to say anything?
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Jason Barron with Morningstar Law Group. It's a pleasure seeing at least 3 of you right now. There might be others, but all my screen is giving me the benefit of is 3 of y'all. It's good to see everybody virtually, and hopefully this maybe, fingers crossed, is the last time we have to do this virtually, at least here for a little while. Excited to be here. Joining me virtually tonight are Gino Ray and Rich Leonardi of LG Investments. They're the folks who have assembled the site and are setting it up for development of the uses that Sarah in her very thorough presentation has shared with you. Also joining me tonight is Jeff Roach with Peak Engineering. His firm has put together the plans associated with this. So if you've got plan specific questions that I'm incapable of answering, I will quickly be punting to my good friend Jeff Roach. And then lastly, Nate Boken with Ramey Kemp is on board to answer any questions that you may have related to traffic. And I'm going to start sharing my screen if that's ever okay with everybody. I've got a brief presentation. As I mentioned, Sarah did a really good job kind of running through the details associated with the case. I think what I'm going to do for the benefit of the board is maybe have a little bit more of a high level discussion associated with the proposal. And as was indicated in Sarah's presentation, the proposal is for a mixed-use development at the intersection of Old Highway 1 and Holland Road in the town. It's in an area where that is designated for a neighborhood activity center. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. The proposal includes up to 100 townhome dwellings, 10 single-family detached dwellings, and up to 76,500 commercial and retail uses. And so you've seen this a couple times now. You can see on the screen the manner in which the property at the southern end of the site is being designated for the commercial. That makes a lot of sense. That's kind of where the hard intersection is. That's where you want the non-residential to be located. And then we've got transitions internal to the site from the commercial to townhomes. And I'll talk a little bit about how those transitions are being achieved and why we think it makes a lot of sense. And then to the single family detached as you make your way into Bella Casa, and that's Vasari. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but that's Vasari Drive here. That's that arrow. That's the vehicular interconnection between this site and the Bella Casa neighborhood to the north. The three themes that I want to focus my discussion on are these, and that is first, the rezoning is consistent with the town's land use plan, essentially the town's long-range plan for what should be developed on this site. We believe that the proposal that's in front of you, the uses that are contemplated by it, the mixture of those uses is indeed consistent with the town's land use plan. We believe that the rezoning provides desirable transitions from the activity center at the hard corner to the Bella Casa community. You know, those are transitions that are being provided kind of from a south to north standpoint. And I'll talk a little bit about that, but it's one of the things that makes this property and this project unique, candidly. And that is, you know, not only do we have a land use plan that we have to follow in this instance, but we have to kind of balance that land use plan versus the existing built environment. And the existing built environment is for single family detached homes. And so one of the things that has been chief in my client's consideration of this case, review of this case, as well as our discussions with the neighbors that have occurred associated with this case, that the chief concern has been, okay, we know what the town wants to see. The town wants to see a mixture of uses, wants to see kind of a heavy commercial presence associated with the neighborhood activity center. That activity center is designed to serve not only this community that we'll be developing, but other communities in the area, some high density residential in the southwest corner of that intersection. So the town wants to see kind of more dense and more intense activity on the site, transitioning up to within our site, the medium density residential, and then into Bella Casa. So it just kind of makes an interesting tug and pull, candidly, on how that can be achieved in a way that makes sense for the town, but also does so in a fashion that will be consistent with the neighbors' expectations associated with their quality of life living in Bella Casa. And the third point that I'm going to talk about later in my discussion will be, you know, kind of the numerous modifications that have been made to address the comments that we've received throughout the zoning process. And as you heard, our neighborhood meeting on this occurred in April of last year. We've been at this for a while, and that's reflective of a variety of things, not the least of which is we've received a lot of feedback. And I know you've heard from a lot of neighbors in the community who are concerned with the case. We understand what those concerns are. They've been very active during the process, and we have made it a goal of ours to be forthcoming with them and to do everything we can to answer questions and provide updates to our plans, again, to ensure that whatever gets developed here as part of this case will have minimal impact on those folks' quality of life. So again, the future land use plan, this is an excerpt, not quite as fancy an excerpt as the one that Sarah had. I don't know where she has a map that shows a much neater version of this, but this is the 2045 land use plan associated with this development. And this is the sites that we're working on in question. So you've got this commercial presence at the hard corner, then you've got medium density residential to the north, and then you've got the Bella Casa neighborhood. And so the uses, and as Sarah noted, one of the things that we have done in this process is we've actually slid this commercial line down, and I'll show that in just a moment. We've slid it down in an effort to be able to provide for better transitions into the Bella Casa neighborhood. So we believe that the proposal that you see here, so you can kind of compare and contrast that. If we were looking at the previous map, that line of the commercial versus residential is probably somewhere in this ballpark here. And so what we have done is kind of shift that down there, really focus the commercial in this area here. There's plenty of room to achieve the square footage that's contemplated by the zoning case for those commercial areas, and then be able to have some attached dwellings, some townhomes serve as a transitional use, and then single family detached along the northern portion of the site before you get into the single family detached associated with Bella Casa. So we believe on balance, what we're proposing in the mixture of uses is consistent with the town's long-range plans. Additionally, we believe that the mixture of uses that we're providing provide effective transitions to those very people that we've been hearing from in Bella Casa. And again, that was the point that I was making earlier, and that is we have been really focused on balancing what the town wants versus what the neighbors' expectations are in an effort to kind of make the right use and the right fit in this as part of this development. And so the single family detached existing along this northern side, you know, I commend my client for being able to incorporate the transitions internal to the site. You know, oftentimes what you see in these cases is that the townhomes will essentially serve as that transitional use. And so especially when you've got commercial, because you don't want to put single family detached immediately adjacent to commercial uses. And so it stands to reason that, you know, somebody could have come along and said, hey, we're just going to make all of this townhomes, and townhomes are a good transition to the single family detached adjacent to the site to the north. I commend my client for being willing to say, you know what, we need to provide those transitions internal to our site, that we want this to be the right fit for the folks who are living that area. Those folks who built their homes or bought their homes in Bella Casa shouldn't have to have townhomes immediately adjacent to them. The folks who are going to be buying in this community fully expect that that's the case. They know that there will be townhomes immediately adjacent to them. So I think this plan does a really good job of providing those transitions internal to the site, not expecting the transitions to occur on the hard edges, and does so in a way that is sensitive to the folks who live in Bella Casa. And then the third point that I want to talk about are changes that have been made to this application since it started. And these are just a handful of them. There have been, you know, not surprising, again, we started in May, and we've answered a lot of questions that it didn't feel like it was necessary to include all of the responses in a presentation of this nature. This is intended to be more high level, but one of the things that has occurred is the single family development has extended further into the site. One of the first comments that we received, and I'm going to go back to this slide, when this case originally started, the line between single family detached and the single family attached, essentially the townhomes, was in this area here. And one of the comments that we received out of the gate from the folks who live in Bella Casa was they didn't think it was appropriate to have townhomes in this location, that as they made their way from Vasari Drive, and you can see there's going to be an east-west connection kind of in this area here, and then you've got the north-south Vasari Drive, which will essentially create a T intersection. They did not want to see townhomes as they were leaving their community and going out to Holland Road. So this kind of jut out that you see here was an effort by my client to be able to address that concern by extending the detached dwellings even further into the site, convert that block of townhomes from single family attached to single family detached, and be able to respond to that question and that comment that we received from the neighbors. We've agreed to develop the lots immediately adjacent to Vasari Drive at greater than 12,000 square foot lot sizes. And so there is essentially going to be two lots created here, one lot here and one lot here. That is at that kind of hard T intersection that Vasari and this east-west drive will create. And there's going to be two 12,000 plus square foot lots in that location, one on either side of that drive. Those are going to be oriented facing each other. So essentially it will feel like it's an extension of the neighborhood to the north. As you drive down Vasari, the break between kind of where the homes currently are developed within Bella Casa and where these homes sit, you know, nobody's gonna be facing the back of any homes. You're just gonna get a front of homes in that 12,000 square foot ballpark. Again, that was a pretty significant concession that was made as part of this process in an effort to address concerns that my client was hearing from the folks who lived immediately adjacent to the site about how this development would be impacting them. Third, buffers have been increased and candidly gerrymandered, and I hesitate to use that term because it's a term that's received a lot of popularity recently, but these buffers have in fact been gerrymandered to the specific request of the neighbors who were adjacent to the site. And you can't see it very well on this slide, but you see these darker greens. Those are 30-foot type A buffers. Those exceed the code standards. And what we have done is we've provided a provision in here that, again, and Mr. Roach, to his credit, met on site with the neighbors, walked the property line to get feedback about what their concerns were. Also to get essentially a survey, kind of a live survey of what vegetation was there today, determine whether anything was worth saving or not saving. And we've constructed a condition that will essentially provide for the installation of berms, a 3-foot berm in each of these areas, as well as in this area here, and then plantings on top of that berm in an effort to provide not only visual buffer between the uses, but also noise buffers. There was concerns associated with noise from the development, and that was a concession that was made and arrived at with an on-site meeting. I think it was last fall that occurred. And then the last change that I want to talk a little bit about is that kind of going back to that block of townhomes along Vasari that has been removed in favor of detached dwellings. And if you kind of look at where the uses are, as I mentioned, the line of commercial originally is kind of in this location here, and you can see what my client has been trying to do, and that is, okay, we want to make sure that commercial is going to have a significant presence as we take the single family detached product, the look and feel of detached, and we incorporate it into the site. Essentially, the line gets shifted down through this process. And again, that continues to be an effort to provide the right use, the right fit in this location as part of this plan. Related to the staff's recommendation on this case, I want to address the affordable housing as well as the perimeter buffers. I'll let you know that we are increasing the buffers along Holland Road and Old Highway 1 to 30 feet. We just didn't catch that before it made its way into the final packet. So that 20 foot that you currently see adjacent to Holland and Old Highway 1 will be 30 feet with our next submittal before we make it to council. On affordable housing, Sarah is right that, before this case was submitted, the applicant's team was made aware of the town's desire to see affordable housing developed in the town in general. And up until, the last couple of months, the direction that this development had been proceeding along was a direction that a lot of other cases in the town had followed. And that was some contemplation that affordable housing need would be made or met with a contribution to the town's fund. And I'm sure this board has seen a couple of those cases that went through, and there have been cases that have been able to incorporate versions of affordable housing on the site, whether it's doing smaller lots or simplifying architecture. But there's certainly been cases that have been adopted over the course of the last year that contemplated payment into the affordable housing fund. And that was the direction that this one was planning to follow all along, because the cost associated with the homes that are going to be here is substantial. I mean, these are townhomes that are going to be in the $500,000 plus ballpark. I mean, this is incredibly valuable real estate. My client anticipates it's going to be incredibly popular, and to strike on-site affordable housing is really a challenge. It really is, just because of those market rates and the difference in the unit price. One of the things that you all are aware has changed is the town has hired CJ to be the town's affordable housing director. Great hire. He's been fantastic to work with. I've really enjoyed getting to know him. We've actually met with CJ on multiple occasions about this site to try to understand what options we had. One of the things that has become clear in those conversations is that the town is adamant about finding ways to have affordable housing occur on site. That the idea that we had been following, and that was, well, if we can't do it and it's tough to do, then we will make a payment to the town's fee. That's kind of off the table. And that has been a fairly significant shift in the direction of this project with respect to affordable housing. Additionally, as you all are aware, the town doesn't have an affordable housing policy yet. I mean, the town certainly has an affordable housing plan, and CJ is working towards having kind of a formal policy with respect to affordable housing. We're just ahead of the curve on that. And so my client right now doesn't have the ability to offer what we believe to be an affordable housing condition for this development. However, as you can see in my first bullet there, My client is willing to and has kind of crunched the numbers on what the AMI delta is between the 100% AMI versus what the market is here. My client is comfortable being able to offer 2 affordable housing units on site. So 2 of the 110 units would be affordable at the 100% AMI. That's a product of conversations we've had with CJ, but we just don't have a condition yet to be able to offer because of how recent these discussions are. We had our first meeting with CJ in the early part of January. Our second meeting with CJ about 10 days ago. And so it's just, it's one of those things, just being honest with you, the conversation related to housing affordability and the direction of the town is changing quickly, and we're trying to respond to it. I know my client it has a genuine interest in being able to meet the town's expectations, but right now we just don't have a condition that we can offer that we think is going to be affordable, but we're working on it. So I hate to hammer that point home, but I did feel like it was necessary for this board to understand that I think my client is caught in a little bit of a limbo in trying to satisfy the town's desire for housing affordability. They believe they can do it. We're just in front of a policy, and we anticipate that policy will contemplate enforceable zoning conditions. We just don't know what that looks like right now. So in summary, as I mentioned, we believe the proposal is consistent with the town's long-range plan, that the PD plan that we've come up with, that my client has come up with, it provides ideal transitions between the commercial presence that will exist at the Hart intersection and the Bella Casa community to our north. I believe that the changes that have been made throughout this process, dating back to May of last year, have shown a genuine commitment to try to make this the right fit and ensure that folks' quality of life won't be compromised with this development. And like I said, lastly, the affordable housing discussion is still in the works. And so with that, I'll open it up to any questions. Like I said, my clients are on the phone as well, along with Jeff Roach and Nate Boken of Peak Engineering and Ramey Kemp, respectively.
Thank you, Jason. Do we have any questions from the board for staff or for Jason?
Hi, Reggie, this is Tina Sherman. I am here, Mr. Barron, and have actually spent the entire day on my day job on camera, and so I am choosing to serve in this volunteer capacity off camera. I appreciate your understanding in that. If we could go back to maybe I think it's your first or second slide. Okay, wait, I'm sorry. The slide that popped up before that, so that may have been the third slide. Yes. Okay. I appreciate the broad strokes here. I absolutely do have some concerns. I think I'll bring before the planning board as we're discussing. I do appreciate the modifications that have been made to address neighbor concerns. But as I'm sure that you're aware that we've gotten additional, numerous other ones that have not been addressed. So I have some concerns about those, and specifically relating to the transitions as well between the existing neighbors and where the commercial has moved to, and where the the townhomes exist. And I think you had stated that that doesn't happen very often. Actually, in Apex, it does. Unbelievably, it does, and it happens really well. So I know that there's some additional room that can be made there. I do appreciate and see the modifications that have been made, but I think there's some additional work that can be done there, and would love to see that those conversations continue. And I'm very, very concerned about even before staff was laying out their concerns, and I was reviewing the staff packet. I'm concerned about some of the RCA changes in requests and the buffers that are not there. And so I raised those as concerns as well. And of course, obviously, topping it off with staff's recommendation to not approve this, have some concerns there as well. Yeah, so I just wanted to lift those as, I think there's some more work to be done here. I appreciate that you raised the affordable housing issue. I do understand that that this has been in the works. I serve on the affordable housing committee as a member of the planning board, and this while that is still in the works, this should not come at all as a surprise. And so I want the public at large to know and hear and see that. You and Mr. Roach know that this has been in the works and that conversations have been happening. And so I think that to appear surprised, I think is maybe not is not genuine, because we know that these conversations around affordable housing and the policies around are in development, and so it's going to be kind of sticky the next little bit while those go. But this has been ongoing. This is not a surprise, and so I'm not convinced that there's not some additional work that can be done in that arena as well, before I would be willing to vote for approval to go to town council. And I think the last point I'll make, that I know I'm going to sound like a broken record to my fellow planning board members, is the fact that Wake County Schools, and Sarah and Amanda, I appreciate you sending us that via email, because this application has been submitted a while ago. The reason for that update was that the original letter from Wake County Public Schools was, and I'm sorry, I don't even have it up anymore, but it was several months ago, many months ago, last year. And so this was an update that was welcomed and appreciated, that addresses some of the changes that have occurred. But the reality is that the high school is capped. As a mother of a student who's at the high school, and 3 additional kids coming down the line, the high school is capped. And while Wake County has stated that the high school and the elementary school in the next 5 years are going to have capacity, the middle school is not. So this is going to be an ongoing battle that we're going to continue to face as members of the planning board when it comes to rezoning applications that come before us. And I would just say that a community would have to provide a significant benefit for me to feel comfortable and encouraging additional building in that area. So I think I put all that on the table, both Mr. Barron for you, Mr. Roach for you, and the rest of my planning board members. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. Any other comments or questions?
Yes, this is Keith. I have a question. The applicant has offered to extend the buffers on Holland and US 1. Is that taking care of all of the perimeter that the town, the staff was concerned with?
If there is, and Jason, I forget there on the side, is it that a 30-foot buffer along all street fronts?
Yes, so there's currently 30 feet shown on Hume Olive. It would extend that 30 feet along the project frontage here at Highway 1 and then up Holland Road.
Yes, then yes, that would be consistent.
Okay, great. Would that take care of all of the buffers around that would be in compliance with staff around the whole, on the eastern and the northern and western border?
So that does take care of the buffers here, because we were a little shy here, right, of our standard. Staff is fine here. We're glad that the applicant has worked with the neighbors here. We think that everybody will end up with a better product. Sort of here, depending upon what comes here, which of course is the unknown, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Sarah,
because
what's the here you're referring to? This is
Yeah. Do you want me to Sarah, you want me to stop sharing so you can share your screen?
No, it's okay. You can, I'm sorry. I totally, because I have that same graphic, I'm moving my mouse on it, but I forget that y'all can't see the mouse cursor. Thank you for bringing me back into it. So I'm talking about the, the piece there to the west, the backwards section of the L there. Jason, if you've got the mouse going. And then on the other, going east to west, yeah, so that buffer right there. So, there is a condition that buffer would go away if we're looking, I think, at non-residential development there, if I recall correctly. But the challenge is we don't know what's going to go right there, so we don't know what buffer would be required between uses. And also we don't know at the time that development is coming in for this commercial area along the south there, along Hume Olive Road. We don't know what the adjacent land will be. We don't know if it's still going to be the single family vacant rural residential, or if it will have gone through the rezoning process, if they will be looking at doing something right by the time we get to site plan. I say all of that because the buffers are based on use. So we don't know what the proposed use is going to be down here, and we don't know what we may be looking at that might be different for adjacent. So I had put in required buffers based on some of the typical non-residential uses that they had proposed. Not any of the most intense uses, and then obviously not the single, it needed to be a non-residential. And,
Okay.
and I would say that I would also defer to the applicant because I know they've had conversations
Right.
With adjacent folks, and they probably have a better idea of what the market is like for that particular area and what might be coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, and so and that's that note, and thanks for Sarah that segue. That note that we have that basically says we're going to provide this 20-foot unless it's a shared access reflects the active conversations that my client has had with this property owner in essentially working out a street network and plan for development of this site that would contemplate essentially shared access that would allow them access to their site and have a road kind of running along the property boundary. So that there have been definitely conversations with that owner relative to this particular buffer and how access is going to be provided to each of the sites.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And that's what I was getting at, was because staff was only recommending approval if you had affordable housing or increased buffers. So I was wondering if all the increased buffers component was satisfied.
Thank you, Keith. Ryan, you had a question?
I do. I actually have a few questions. I'd like to talk a little bit, Jason, actually probably with Nate a little bit more about the traffic impact analysis. I went through and there was a lot of neighborhood letters, and a lot of people spent a lot of time crafting very, very well thought out points. But as I got into them, I put them all on a map, and I put where everybody lives and went through kind of the issues. And I don't want to dismiss, there's a large contingent of those people that live over a mile away from this development. So I really want to focus on the people that are directly impacted by this, but mainly the people to the north of the single family detached. And a lot of them had a really, what I think is pretty reasonable ask. And I'm friends with a lot of people that live in this development, and I hear directly from them, and they're like, hey, the issue is the Holland Road. Every time school, there's a contingent of people from Holly Springs, from 12 Oaks, that are coming up to the high school there. They're trying to make a left turn out of Friendship, and people are trying to get to work in the morning, making a left turn out of Holland. So the two left turns are not working together. And I know that's an existing configuration, but to the neighbor's point, we're putting additional trips on these roads. Now, granted, there is some good improvements being made along the frontage. The question I have, and I'd like to hear from the traffic folks, is are generation or trip generation out of this development, are they going to be heading north through the adjacent development, or would the trips most likely stay on this development? And I guess part B of that is, how can we address the dual left turn conflict movement to help the neighbors? Because I think a lot of them, most of them that live in the development next door are like, look, if you could do that, I mean, you know, it's development. We don't want to see it next door, but we understand it's coming. What can we do?
Okay. Nate, I know you're present. I'm going to I'll lean on you to answer those questions, and or Jeff if they involve engineering.
Yeah. Thanks, Jason, and thanks, Ryan. So for the traffic and within our development, we would anticipate they would leave through our site driveways. That would be their quickest and easiest route out, which from my experience is where folks tend to utilize. Folks like the convenience factor. In terms of your question about the left turn lane, sorry, I may not have followed you there.
So it's basically like Holland Road southbound left turn to get towards, you know, 540. There's a contingent of people, a lot of Bella Casa folks actually try to get around Evans Road because it's a boondoggle when school's in session. So they're using this development to the north as a back door to make a left turn out of Hollands Road to avoid all the mess. But also there's people northbound on Friendship that are coming in the morning to get to school there. So that intersection is a boondoggle from what I've been told. I don't live right there, but you know, from what people have told me.
Yeah, definitely. So for that one, the town has an ultimate plan to realign those two so that it would be aligned as just one intersection. That would involve land that is not part of this project. So that was outside of the extent that we could contribute to it. We are also contributing, providing the turn lanes there that I think would allow those folks to at least be separated from the folks that are not making that same maneuver to help minimize some of the impacts of that. And then we would also be providing another connection back out to Hume Olive that would allow you to get to that signal there and potentially ease that maneuver as well.
Yeah, and if I could just add to the point, Ryan, that Nate just made on the realignment, the information we have from the town is that realignment is going to be realigning Holland to Friendship and not the other way around. And so some configuration will have to be arrived at, but there's currently not an approved plan at the town or DOT level for that project to move forward. And I think I heard that Russell's here, and I'll defer to him, but the information that I have seen from the town on that point is there is a plan to fix it, and it involves realignment, but it's a question of when, and that's property that's, as Nate noted, is not part of this development, and so we have very little control over it.
What would cause a signal warrant? I guess, Nate, maybe you could answer that at that I mean, it's kind of wonky being like offset like that. Is there a way to get a signal there?
You could definitely signalize it. It would require a lot more traffic on the minor streets. So on Holland and on Friendship, that's usually the main driver for whether or not intersections are meeting the signal warrants is having sufficient traffic on those minor street approaches. I think that might be one where when you signalize one, you might be able to signalize the other and have them operating on one controller. That's something that would definitely need to be reviewed by a signal designer. But yeah, that would be your main driver, is just having sufficient traffic on those minor street approaches. Looking at the volumes that are out there, it's pretty far from meeting those warrants today.
Can I ask a question, Jason? Would you, just so that you can say to the neighbors that, look, we hear you, could you make a condition that you're willing to put a signal in subject to MUT, or what is it, NC DOT signal warrant analysis, and have a traffic consultant run that analysis? And if what Nate is saying is correct, then it presumably wouldn't be viable.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have an answer for you tonight on that, Ryan. I don't disagree that that's a not unreasonable approach. the first time it's been suggested as part of this process. So it's just, you know, it's a new way of kind of looking at it in terms of this zoning case. I'll talk to my client and figure out if that's something they're willing to do. And I've got an active text thread with them right now, so I've got the ability to kind of communicate back and forth without causing unnecessary delays as part of this meeting.
I mean, it just seems like something that you can at least look the neighbors in the eye and say, look, you know, we would if we could, but if DOT says you can't, then, you know, we get that. You know, it's sad truth that, you know, accidents need to happen before warrants are met, but that's kind of the DOT way. I do have a staff question regarding Bella Casa and the development to the north. I know the applicant's doing a, you know, I like to have Mr. Barron put it, the gerrymandered buffers, but why didn't Bella Casa have a buffer on the north side adjacent to this development?
So Ryan, this is Amanda. That section of Bella Casa was developed prior to there being a requirement for a buffer between single family uses.
Okay.
That buffer was, and Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that buffer was added in about 2015-ish, 2016.
So. But yeah, it was definitely added after Bella Casa.
All right. And since I've got staff's attention, part B of the neighborhood concerns, which there were many, the people that were directly to the north off, it started with a V, but I want to say it was
Vasari.
Vasari. Yeah, sorry, Vasari. They are like, hey, we want a cul-de-sac. Now, I do land development and I'm a consultant too. I get it that you have a street stub interconnectivity, and if it's there, you got to connect to it. So I didn't see the viability of putting a cul-de-sac in being a real solution here. But speed tables and traffic abatement, is there a way? And I'm not asking the applicant here to put a speed table on, you know, their short segment of road until they get to their T intersection adjacent to those 12,000 square foot lots. But this is just for me to have the discussion with my colleagues and staff. Is there a way that the members that live off Vasari can get a speed table request through staff, through transportation? What does that process look like?
So, Ryan, we have a request process that's defined in our UDO. The UDO also prohibits neighbors from, I guess, getting that as a concession for something that's not been studied, that does not meet our traffic calming warrants. So the process would be that, you know, when the street's connected, as development occurs, as traffic increases, they can make a request to the town. That information is online through our traffic division. It would require any homeowner in a neighborhood can make a traffic calming request. We would evaluate it, see if it looks like it's going to meet thresholds to study. We'd coordinate with Apex Police and conduct that study. If it doesn't meet warrants, we'd report that information back to them. If it does meet warrants, we could proceed with a plan, but that would involve the HOA and a petition process as well. So we do want to make sure that, you know, it follows all our requirements if we're going to recommend something like speed humps. You know, not everybody likes speed humps. We certainly don't want to assume that everybody does. So there is a very well-defined process. And that process was actually something we worked on with Apex Police and a number of HOA groups when we revised our ordinance some years ago.
Okay, thank you, Russell.
Tim, I believe you had a question or questions.
I did. Yeah, I was kind of piggyback a little bit off of Ryan, what you had mentioned. I was looking at page 180 of our packet, which, let's see what looks like page 31 of the traffic study. And in reading that second paragraph through, it says that, you know, a traffic signal was only warranted during the weekday morning peak hour under the 2025 building traffic conditions. Although the 2025 building volumes at the intersection are expected to meet weekday AM peak hour warrants due to the residential nature of the study, which typically operates with the two distinct peak hours, it's unlikely that the 4 8-hour warrants would be met, which would favor the signalization. So it sounds like in this study that they conducted that they weren't 100% certain that a signal wouldn't be warranted at this area, that I said, well, it's kind of unlikely, but I'm just kind of wondering, they said that they're looking at the residential areas, but once these other out parcels potentially develop out, or if you put in some sort of drive-through, I'm kind of wondering, the increased traffic in this area, or, with the gas station as well, the increased traffic right there at the intersection of the Holland and Old One. I'm just also kind of wondering, would it not be to the public's favor to also go ahead and have a traffic signal there? So I kind of also in the same vein here as Ryan Akers on this one.
Well, I'm gonna, Nate, I'm gonna turn it back over to you to help everybody understand that section of the traffic study that you all did and how that relates to the information you just provided relative to the fact that it doesn't come close to meeting those warrants as of today.
Yeah, so the AM peak hour is looking at one specific hour of the day. That's kind of that busiest time when everybody's leaving, when schools are letting in. The 4 and the 8 hour is typically the main drivers for those signal warrant analyses that DOT is looking for, and that requires a fairly significant volume of retail or additional development in that area to really meet those warrants. And that would also require a pretty significant volume of the commercial and again, other developments to be utilizing that minor street. And so with the additional connections that this site has to Hume Olive and some of the other connections down to Old US 1, for instance, we don't anticipate that traffic's really going to be centralized just to one minor street approach. And so we would not anticipate that warrants for a signal would be met. It would likely be pretty far from that based on the data that we have seen.
So Nate, question for you, and this is just trying to satisfy my curiosity. I know it's weird, the zoning applicant's attorney asking their own consultant, but this has been an interesting conversation, so I came up with a question. Is like signalizing one of the intersections going to make any meaningful benefit as opposed to doing both? I mean, I've dealt with something similar in Cary. I think like the Pierce Olive intersection on Holly Springs Road has a slight offset, and they ended up having to signalize both in order to make that one work. This kind of feels a little bit like that. Is a signal enough to like help with the issue, or is it kind of two signals or bust?
Yeah, that's actually a great comparison because very similar situation here. It likely would need both to be signalized to really make a significant impact. Otherwise, you're just going to have traffic queued up beyond the other intersection. And so again, we'd be looking at the minor streets for both of those intersections there.
Gotcha. Okay. Sorry, Mr. Chair. I don't know if I violated protocol by asking my own consultant question, but I blame Ryan Akers.
It was something I was thinking as well, and you beat me to the question because we already have one signal that's coming in at the frontage of the commercial property, and this one's just to the east of it that we're discussing. Yeah. Any other questions for the applicant or staff from the board?
I do have a follow-up question because this just got my brain working because that was exciting when we talked about the two signals. There looks to be a few other rezonings in the area, and I don't know that we've seen them all yet. Is there a way to kind of like, I'm not going to say developers agreement, but kind of like what happened on the Wimberley Road pump station where a bunch of developers got together, and if it is warranted at that point, could they then enter into an agreement, kind of like Town of Cary does this fantastically, where they pool a bunch of the TARs together and then sort it out and do like a pro rata for something like that, just to help, not everybody has to bear, or not one person has to bear the responsibility of that mess of an intersection.
Yeah, and Ryan, to your point, I mean, I've had success in Cary as well as other jurisdictions. Holly Springs, for instance, will readily enter into development agreements whereby they'll accept from the developer a fee associated with some amount in an effort to facilitate future construction of a signal that may not warrant at that time. I could chat with my client about whether that's possible in this instance, but I haven't seen a case in Apex do that, but I don't think that means it's not possible. I don't know if any folks on the staff have opinions on that or not, but I think it would have to be vis-a-vis some sort of development agreement that the town would be a party to, if it was going to be a part of a zoning case.
Yeah, I would just say it's very difficult for us to administer. If you had a zoning condition that said there was a partial cost share toward a signal, I suppose you could do that. But it's contingent on the town obtaining all the different cost shares that are assigned through zoning. We have had conditions before where a development might be responsible for a signal if warranted, and if not, they would be required to pay a fee in lieu. The traffic signal we recently installed down at New Hall Chapel Road at Old US 1, that was actually designed and right away was acquired. Well, actually, it was designed. It was and right away was acquired and installed by with the town administering that contract using developer fee money. So we've done that kind of thing before. It just depends on whether you think you would entertain a 30% cost share, 50% cost share, but keep in mind that it's hard to define a schedule for multiple different zoning projects for offsite improvements. So they may pay their share, but there may be another development that doesn't move forward as quickly, and we're waiting on that share. And in the meantime, the signal might get warranted and people are asking for it to be installed, and we don't have those extra cost shares in place.
Any other questions from the board for the applicant or staff?
Reggie, I've got one. Real quick. The entrance that's coming out on Old US 1 that is a dedicated right in, right out would, and I might have missed it on the traffic map, but is there an indication, is there a plan that there will be that the barrier, I'll say, causing the right in, right out, will it extend all the way to the traffic light there at Hume Olive? And if so, does that mean that the folks, because I live on Friendship Road, and part of the problem is like late afternoons when people are at Vicious Fishes and they're trying to exit, they have a stoplight at the pool at Hume Olive, but then they're also exiting along their parking lot left and right out onto Old Number 1, if I'm making sense.
And I'm not sure to whom that question
Sarah,
is.
is that you driving?
I'm driving, but I don't think I'm going to be the one to answer the question. I apologize if I made anybody dizzy for us getting here. So you're talking about if this access point roughly here is going to be barricaded through a median to here or to here?
Yeah, up to Hume Olive. Yeah, up going south to Hume Olive.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't require, I was just going to add, we don't require the barrier to be extended any further than is needed to control right in, right out access. We don't have the roadway plans yet, of course, but right. I assume, working with the developer, we would seek to minimize the amount of barrier that's needed out there, but still make sure we control those movements. So I don't think it would be an issue.
Okay. All right, super. Thank you.
It appears there's another hand up, but I can't tell who it is.
Reggie, it might have been me. I have taken my hand down.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Any other questions for the applicant or staff? All right, then I guess we need to open the public hearing portion. Did we receive any comments? I know it's a rhetorical question, but.
Sarah, you're okay.
Yes, we did. Sorry. We did receive several comments. Let me get us back here to a quick share. I apologize for that. So we did hear from several neighbors. As has been discussed, most of them shared similar concerns. There was one neighbor who did write in support of the overall project.
And planning board, as a reminder, all these comments were emailed to you as they were received by staff.
Yep.
Yes, thank you, Amanda.
So at this point, I guess we close the public hearing portion and then discussion amongst the board and a possible motion.
Amanda, this is Tina. I just want to express appreciation for emailing those public comments as they came in. That was deeply appreciated. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any discussion or motion?
I can take a stab. I think this development has a lot of things that I like, but I still have some concerns. Obviously, when we receive that many neighbor emails that are that well thought out, it makes my eyebrows go up a little bit. I will say that I do like, and the image that's pulled up right now, the site plan layout, I do like the gradation from north to south with decreasing density going north to mesh very well with the Bella Casa existing development. I do like that the applicant worked very closely on the gerrymandering of said buffers against the subdivision, which today would have to have its own buffer, but it doesn't. So I think that's fair that this developer is utilizing some of their land, or this owner is utilizing some of their land to address that concern. I like that the connection based on the traffic engineering. Traffic engineer says that most of this or all of this development traffic will head out through its own points of egress. The only thing I just enough people have talked to me personally about this signal, so I'd love if there was a way, Mr. Barron, that we could craft some type of a condition that you guys would do a warrant analysis. Now, I don't know what that would look like or how we could do that. Maybe I'll push to staff, but if we could do that, I really want to support this project. I think single family attached is something we need in Apex. I think we've got a lot of, $500,000 plus houses, and we're driving up the cost. It's not getting cheaper. And, we start throwing in housing affordability components, and the rest of the houses have to absorb that. So, it's only going to get more expensive. And we had 8% inflation this year. I don't know what next year is going to be. Now's the time. It's here in front of us. I like it. But the signalization, I just heard enough people that are just, they would go a long way if we could do something there.
Yeah. And Mr. Akers, I think what I would tell you is that my client is willing to commit to a condition whereby they would conduct a warrant analysis. When that would be done, what I've seen happen before is, within a year after the development is stabilized, like within a year of the infrastructure being built for the single family homes or the townhomes being put in, it would be kind of the last moment that a warrant analysis would occur associated with the site. And that they would be willing to fund the construction of at least one of the signals. This is all new information, but we're trying to respond quickly to the point that you're making. I can't commit tonight that they would fund both signals if warranted. We don't think it's going to be warranted based on the information that's available to us through our consultants, but are inclined to make an offer to conduct a warrant analysis and construct and install at least one of the signals as part of that process.
I guess I'll look to staff to see if that's, what would that look like? How can we make that happen?
Yeah, if they, I think the recommendation has to go to council tonight. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know if you're handy with email and want to have some folks stick around to do that. I'm certainly happy to look at something offline if that needs to be done with the planning staff. I defer to Diane on how that needs to be handled.
Yeah, we need to get it in writing, so I would recommend that perhaps the vote's delayed on this project while y'all work out whatever an appropriate condition would be. I need to get it in writing so I can put it in the planning board report to town council. So I don't know if that will even be enough time. We don't have that many more agenda items, but we can try.
I mean, alternatively, and just throwing this out there, I mean, I think, well, and this is a question maybe for Diane, is it not possible for the planning board to make a recommendation that says that the recommendation is essentially subject to a condition related to this warrant analysis being worked out by the time it gets to council?
Sure, but I still need you to send that to me in an email.
Well, no, and you need that tonight. I mean, I guess that's I'm trying to. I'm also dealing with the same time constraint that we all are. I mean,
I have to be able to write something in the planning board report to town council, and if they want a condition, even if it's we want a condition to address this that will be ready for council's meeting, that's fine. But I need it written out. I can't type what you just verbally said.
Understood.
I'm not a court reporter. I can't type that. I need it sent to me.
A lot of things, not that. Yeah. Mr. Akers, would it be sufficient for you for us to craft a condition that tonight commits to within a year of the CO for the 100th home being built, that a signal warrant analysis will be conducted, and just making a commitment that we'll do the analysis, and between now and council, I'll tell you publicly, we're going to try to work out something more robust than that. But for purposes of your motion tonight, would that be something that you'd entertain?
Yeah, if you condition it that way, you're pushing it out, which is more beneficial for the town, in my opinion. So right. Yeah, I think that would make a lot of people happy, and like I said before, I can support this, and knowing full well I won't get, torched when I go see these folks in the near future. That'd be my position. Yeah.
I don't think we can tie conditions to building permits or COs.
Yeah, not for residential.
Is this phased?
It's essentially going to be one phase.
It could be tied to the number of residential lots platted.
How about, well, platted is, you're going to plat it as one phase, so.
This is Tina. While we're discussing conditions, I'm wondering if we can come up with a condition for affordable housing and have that be tied into this as well. There was one proposed here. I would push for additional conversations with CJ that would come up with something more formal. But I thought if we were discussing conditions, I would put that out there.
And Ms. Sherman, we have been working actively with CJ in a very genuine fashion over the course of the last 5 weeks to try to tackle that very item. Right now, we just don't have language that would be able to be offered tonight that would be enforceable. We're continuing to work with CJ, and I'm optimistic that we're going to have something, but we just don't have that yet because the town staff doesn't have the model for us to follow. So we're creating something new. So the answer is we won't have that for tonight, unfortunately.
And I understand we're trying to get there, but we're also trying to get there on the traffic too. So that's why I did understand that we aren't quite there. But if we're trying to get there on one condition, I don't see why we can't equally try to get there on the other.
I have a question, and this may be for staff, but my question is, has the applicant met they were denied for either the reduction in several perimeter buffers or affordable housing? have they, I know that they've stepped up the buffer on Holland in US 1, and I guess my question is, have they satisfied the reduction? Have they taken away the reduction in several perimeter buffers to where affordable housing is no longer a requirement? It was one or the other, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm just wondering if the perimeter buffers is still an issue.
Diane, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think for our conversations, the increase in the buffer along Old US 1 and Holland Road to meet the 30-foot minimum, and then with an offer of affordable housing, that the remainder of the buffers would be acceptable by staff.
Okay.
We would consider, we can't consider it till we have a affordable housing condition to consider.
Correct.
It doesn't work both ways. The buffers not being the standard buffers is problematic. But if an affordable housing condition were offered such that it's more important to get the affordable housing than to get the full buffer, because we know there's trade-offs. We can't have everything. We can't have all the environmental stuff and all the housing stuff. We have to do trade-offs. But I cannot say right here if the trade-off's worth it or not until we have an affordable housing condition for our housing staff to review.
Okay, thank you for clarification.
Good evening. This is Stephen Rhodes. I've got a question. So there was an offering of 2 units for the affordable housing. It is without there being an affordable housing policy in place. What would those units look like? I mean, are we talking 2? What if they offered 4 units? Does that get us closer to that bargaining number?
I can't answer that question. We have housing staff who's very, very well versed in this area, and they are able to have more specific conditions in terms of percentage of AMI and things like that. But we do not have anything to work with to make a recommendation. We will not be able to change our recommendation today.
This is Tina. I would like to make a recommendation on this application, but also not wanting to cut off conversation. I will pause.
So are you making a motion? Is that what you're saying, Tina?
Yeah, I was going to make a motion, but I also did not want to cut off conversation.
Okay.
So I was going to pause and make sure that I was not cutting off conversation.
Ryan, are you still formulating your motion, or?
Well, no, I'll let Tina make the motion on this.
Okay. Given the outstanding items on this application, I'm going to make a motion that we do not send our approval for case 21CZ14, the Holland Road Mixed Use Assembly, to Town Council.
So we have a motion. We need a second as well as some conditions, I believe, Diane, is that right?
Well, is that a motion for denial?
That is a motion for denial, so
Okay.
conditions are not
Yeah.
warranted.
Yeah, so if there's a second and you all are interested in voting that, then we do need to go through the planning board report to town council to determine which items were not consistent.
So we have a motion by Tina.
Would it be to the applicant's advantage if we table this until the next meeting, so that way we can formulate the 2 big items that seems like is holding things up, which is traffic signalization and affordable housing?
Yeah, Mr. Roy, I appreciate you extending that olive branch, but unfortunately, we are at the end of our rope from a contract standpoint on this. So, we just don't have the benefit of time of taking a lap with the planning board to work these issues out. I think we could, you're right, I'm optimistic that we could. We just don't have the benefit of time. And so we're just gonna have to deal with the consequences of not being able to answer those questions for you tonight. And I apologize for that.
Okay.
If there's no second to Ms. Sherman's motion, I might counter that motion, but I'll wait for Reggie or staff to acknowledge how we need to do that procedurally.
I'm not certain if we don't have a second how that goes forward.
So Reggie, if there's no second, you would say that the motion, I don't know what the word is exactly, but dies for lack of a second, and then you ask for another motion.
All right. So if we don't have a second to Ms. Sherman's motion, I guess that motion will die. And then I'll look for another motion.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that the planning board approve case number 21CZ14 as presented by staff with 2 additional elements by the applicant, one being the commitment or proposed language, a signal warrant analysis for the intersection of Holland Road and Old Highway 1 be performed by the applicant prior to the platting of the 100th lot within the development. And the second condition being that a housing or affordable housing condition of 2 units or so agreed upon by staff prior to council be made. That's part of, I kind of formulated that one in my head, but it sounds like we're not off. You guys are willing to commit to it. You just don't know what it is you're willing to commit to because nobody can really solidify what that looks like. And given the urgency and time, I get it. The applicant needs to go, but it sounds like you guys are willing to do something. So I'm favorable. I just don't know what that language looks like. So maybe another board member.
Yeah, I mean, for purposes of tonight, I can say that we'll have 2 houses within the development that will be affordable at the 100% AMI. Those are the conversations we've had with CJ. That's the AMI that we've been asked to target on this development. I can say that blanket. That's not a enforceable condition, I don't think, because it just kind of says we're going to have it and there's no teeth associated with it. But I mean, that's the commitment that I can make for you tonight, and that is the development will include 2 homes that are affordable at the 100% AMI.
Okay.
And if this is the man, if I can interrupt, there was also in the presentation a commitment to increase the buffer widths along Holland Road and Old US 1 to 30 feet.
Yes, add that to so 3 elements.
Can
Staff,
somebody,
are we allowed to actually?
Could someone please type those into the chat so that I have a clue about what these things need to say, please?
So just for clarification, are these actually being offered up, Jason, by you? Or is this just what we're wanting to see and we're just making notation to the council that we want further discussion on these 3 items? Or are these actually being offered up?
These are being offered up.
Okay, thank you.
So the first is buffer increases, and we're saying those are 30-foot buffers.
Correct, along Holland and Old Highway 1.
Second, we said was signalization discussions or warrant study.
Upon the 100th plat, I believe.
Russell added some additional language if that could be reviewed, please.
And developer shall install a traffic signal if permitted by NCDOT at that time. If a traffic signal is not permitted by NCDOT at that time, then developer shall have no future responsibility for a traffic signal.
That's fair. It puts a timeline to it and
So is that part of, that goes to part of the signalization in second step, right?
Yep, and we would be comfortable with that. My client is comfortable with that as long as we all understand that a traffic signal is not two traffic signals.
Just for clarification, who actually hires, who's going to be the responsible party for hiring, and who chooses the party that's going to do the traffic analysis?
Russell, I'll look to you on that.
We've done these types of conditions before. The developer would hire a traffic engineer to perform the warrant analysis. That a warrant analysis would be provided to staff and NCDOT, and there would be a discussion about it. So at that point, NCDOT would decide whether or not to prevent the traffic signal. But it is it is based on the actual traffic counts that are out there at that time.
Thank you, Russell.
Thank you, Russell. So we have item 1, we have item 2, and the third item, keep me honest, was the buffers. We got the signalization and then the affordable housing.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
Mr. Chair, I
affordable
put
housing,
language in the chat. Yeah, I apologize. Go ahead. Sorry.
affordable housing language. Let's see. Let's see your message.
And that language was development of the property shall include 2 homes at 100% of Wake County AMI.
Affordable housing language include 2 homes at 100% Wake County AMI, and that's to be discussed with CJ.
Yes.
So Ryan, does that look like what you're proposing?
Yes, Chairman, it does.
All right. So the motion, if we understand it correctly, is to make a motion to approve with these 3 conditions: 1 on buffer increases, a signalization warrant study, and affordable housing as the third item. Do we have a second?
Second.
This is Keith. I'll second.
All right, so Keith Perez will seconds. All right, so I guess we'll move to a vote then.
I think there's discussion. And I just want to.
I'm sorry, Tina.
Yeah, this is Tina. I'm sorry, just for a point of discussion. I am incredibly uncomfortable with how this process has unfolded this evening. To see the recommendations in the chat, which I appreciate staff is going to put in the report that's going to town council so the public at large can see it. Aside from the traffic signal, which was, I think we fleshed out pretty well here to the extent that we can. So I appreciate the discussion around it. But these were comments and concerns that were brought up by the neighbors that I feel like could have been a little more fleshed out prior to coming to this meeting. And again, the buffers and the affordable housing were also flags that were raised that could have been fleshed out before this meeting. And I'm a little uncomfortable with how this process has unfolded this evening, and just wanted to name that and hope that in the future that I am personally I realize that I may be a minority on this board. I'm personally not concerned about the timelines that exist. I think we should work hard to get things right. As well within as well as within a time frame that's reasonable. And I feel like I hear that there's a tight time frame, but I'm betting that if we put off and tabled this, that we could have had some additional, that these pieces could have been worked out, and we would have had potentially a unanimous vote on this board. But I will be voting against this. Thank you.
Could I just interrupt? This is Diane Ken. So I have 2 of the conditions written by Jason, but the buffer condition was not written out by Jason. And it doesn't offer the type. I don't know if that's a type A, type E, what type of buffer were offered. So either Jeff or Jason can put that in the chat, then I'll have it in writing. Because Reggie attempted to put it in there, but we need it from the applicant.
Jason, I'll respond to that. Reggie, this is Jeff Roach. I'll respond in the chat real quick for everybody, okay?
Thank you. So the buffers would be a type E buffer along Old US 1, as well as Holland, or just along Old US 1?
Sorry, Reggie, I don't type that fast. I'm
Okay.
going to put it, we have 3 different ones. Along Old US 1 will be a 30-foot type E. Along the non-residential portion on Holland Road will be a 30-foot type E as in Edward. And for the residential portion along Holland Road will be a 30-foot type B as in boy. And those match, and Diane and Amanda, correct me if I'm wrong, those comply with the ordinance standards for the collector street requirements for the street front buffers.
That's correct.
All right, so we'll have a type E buffer along non-residential and a type B as in boy buffer along the residential portions. So the 3 conditions are understood.
Are all 3 30-foot buffers?
That is correct, Diane.
Yeah, I think what I just sent with proposed language, Diane, addresses the width as
yep.
well as the nature.
That's perfect. Thank you, Jason.
Yep.
Can you
So
read
this
that
is-
out loud,
okay.
Reggie?
Oh,
Sure.
sorry.
So Jason proposed.
And I have a question, Reggie.
All right, Elaine.
Just a question for the town. With these notes that we're putting in to go to council, would the town have recommended approval of this proposal if these items were in the proposal this evening?
As I stated earlier, we cannot answer that question because we have housing staff that needs to review the housing item. It's possible. We asked to have the condition by Thursday at 2. We were not given that condition, so the housing staff has not had time to review it. I can't answer that question. I don't know. And so we have to continue to recommend denial. They will review it before council and be able to make a recommendation at that time.
Thank you.
All right, so the motion made by Mr. Akers and seconded by Mr. Braswell.
I'm sorry, Reggie. I'm so sorry. Could you read what Mr. Barron wrote in the chat for the public who's listening for their point of view?
I was just getting to that, Tina. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the motion that was made by Mr. Akers and seconded by Mr. Braswell had some conditions tied to it. The conditions were a 30-foot type E buffer along Old Highway 1 for residential development along Holland Road. There would be a 30-foot type B as in boy buffer for non-residential development along Holland Road. There will be a 30-foot type E as in Edward buffer. That covers the buffer portion. And then for signalization, there would be a signalization warrant study. Upon the 100th plat, developer shall install a traffic signal if permitted by NCDOT at the time. If a traffic signal is not permitted by NCDOT at the time, then developer shall have no future responsibility for that traffic signal.
Reggie, can you change that condition number 2, signalization warrant study upon the 100th lot platted?
100th lot platted. Thank you.
Jason, are you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, I've added it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And then the third condition was the affordable housing language to include 2 homes at 100% Wake County AMI to be discussed with CJ from staff prior to going to council. Is that accurate? All right, so we will do a roll call vote. Reggie Skinner, yes. Tina Sherman,
No.
Tim Royal,
Yes.
Keith Braswell,
Yes.
Ryan Akers,
Yes.
Elaine Boyle,
No.
and Stephen Rhodes. I don't believe you vote on that, correct?
Yes.
Stephen should vote.
You should vote? Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Stephen, your vote?
Yes.
So we have 2 dissents.
Diane,
Diane,
for
do you
my
have-
dissent,
Yeah, okay. I want to make sure, is the vote 5-2?
Yes.
Did I miss somebody? Is it 6-2 or 5-2?
5-2.
Okay, thank you. All right, go ahead, Tina.
I'm sorry, I knew you were going to ask, so I jumped the gun there. For my dissent, Wake County Public Schools and the effect on schools would be reason number 1. Reason number 2 would be all of these conditions that we are putting in could have and should have been addressed before this came to before the planning board. And reason number 3, concerns around affordable housing. Thank you, Diane.
Diane, do you need anything else on case 21 CZ14?
Yes, Elaine needs to explain her reasons for dissent, and they can be the same as Tina's or they can be different.
No, I mean, my reason for dissent is basically town staff had recommended not to approve because of around the affordable housing and that not being included. And because we have to get the housing staff to give their opinion on this particular wording, I'm not comfortable in approving it. So that's why I did not.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's it, Reggie.
Thank you. So that
Thank you all.
closes case 21 CZ14. We will move on to item number 2. Shelley Mayo to discuss rezoning case 21 CZ30, the Williams Farm PUD. Before we do that, I need to have a motion made to recuse Mr. Akers.
This is Keith. I'll make a motion to recuse Mr. Ryan Akers from zoning case 21 CZ30, the Williams Farm PUD.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
This is Tina, I'll second.
Thank you, Tina. Diane, do we need to take a vote on that recusal?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Reggie Skinner, yes. Tina Sherman,
Yes.
Tim Royal,
Yes.
Keith Braswell,
Yes.
Elaine Boyle,
Yes.
Stephen Rhodes.
Yes.
All right. The motion passes to recuse Mr. Akers from 21 CZ30. Ryan, please go on mute and cancel your camera. We'll hit you in the chat when it's time to come back to discuss the next item of business.
Good evening, everybody. I promise this one is nowhere near as complicated as the last. So this is just a PUD. This is an amendment for the Williams Farm PUD that y'all heard about 6 or 7 months ago. It's located in the northwesternmost corner of the town's jurisdiction. And this is simply to add a piece of property to that PUD. rezoning case. This piece of property is outlined here in yellow. It's about 1.3 acres, and it currently makes up part of the right-of-way for Green Level West Road. The applicant conducted a neighborhood meeting on November 23rd. And that meeting report's attached to your staff report. However, no one attended. Because of the zoning conditions that were previously approved for Williams Grove PUD, and also because of the town's Unified Development Ordinance, this area, the development for Williams Grove is actually going to be realigning green level right here so that we can get a little bit better sight distance, and it's not quite so harrowing going down that curve through here. So this top corner, this top line kind of illustrates where the new center line will be of the road, and this bottom line illustrates where the existing edge of the right-of-way is on the southernmost corner. Currently, it is zoned Wake County R40W, and the proposal is simply to add it to the Williams Farm PUD rezoning with all of the conditions that were outlined in the approved case. That approved case is attached to your staff report. And this was a part of the rezoning conditions. They said that they would improve the sight distance in this area, even if that involved realigning the road. And the thoroughfare and Collector Street plan map designate this as a future 4-lane median divided thoroughfare. This won't be built to full width at the time, but it will be, this curve will be flattened out to make this easier to navigate. Once that's done, and once the development is constructed, NCDOT will abandon this right-of-way. The developer's already working with DOT on that process, and so this will become a former right-of-way that will then be developable land. And because of the way the UDO requires buffers to start, in order to bring this into the development and make it consistent with the plans, it has to be brought into that development. It has to be rezoned into the development. There will be no changes to the density or the number of lots that are proposed. And because of that, we did not request a new letter of impact from Wake County Public School System. And then this also did not have to go to the EAB because it's not a zoning condition that will have an environmental impact on the site. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. If not, I believe the applicant is on the call as well.
Thank you, Shelley. Does the applicant want to take a minute to explain?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jessie Hardesty. I'm a planner with McAdams. I'll just take a couple minutes of your time here. Shelley, thanks for that. You did a great job presenting the case. Just in summary, the request just goes back to creating a safer road alignment on Green Level West, reducing that sharp curve in the road and straightening out the right-of-way. And in order to do that, we had to add the additional 1.3 acres to the PUD, and we submitted to annex this into Apex as well. Realigning the right-of-way with our master subdivision plan was discussed at the rezoning, but once we submitted our master subdivision, we realized that we had to add in this additional acreage. So everything remains the same in the PUD, as Shelley said, that was approved in July 2021. But otherwise, I really don't think I have anything to add on to Shelley's presentation. I'll just keep it short and sweet. I'm happy to pull up our previously approved PUD if necessary. And Jacob Anderson from Alliance Group of NC and myself are both here to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Jessica. Does anyone on the board have a question for staff or the applicant? I'll take that as a no. All right, then I will open the public hearing section and ask staff if there were any comments received on this rezoning 21 CZ30.
There were not.
Thank you. We'll then close the public hearing. Bring it back to the board for discussion and or a motion.
This is
Well-
Tina. This seems like a pretty straightforward application. So I would make a motion to recommend approval of this application, of this rezoning.
Thank you, Tina. We have a motion from Tina. Do we have a second?
Well, I'm from Green Level, so I'll certainly second. That's a sharp curve, and what they're doing is great.
Thank you, Keith. So we have a motion and a second. I guess we'll now move to a vote. Reggie Skinner, yes. Tina Sherman,
Yes.
Tim Royal,
Yes.
Keith Braswell,
Yes.
Elaine Boyle,
Yes.
Stephen Rhodes, Stephen Rhodes,
Stephen,
Steve,
we
we
can't
cannot
hear
hear
you. Can you turn your camera on? And maybe can indicate a vote that way.
Can you hear me now?
yes, sir.
Sorry about that. I'm trying to work the camera. It's not working for me tonight. So yes.
All right, thank you. So this vote 21CZ30 passes unanimously. Thank you.
Reggie, this is Diane. So that's a vote of 7-0, but I missed who made the motion. I have Keith Braswell as the second. I'm still working on the report from the prior one. I apologize.
No
Who
worries.
made that
Tina
motion?
Sherman. Tina Sherman made the motion.
Okay, thank you.
And the vote was 6-0 because Ryan Akers is recused.
Oh, thank you.
6-0. All right. With that passing, let me tell Ryan he can come back. All right, that moves us to new business. Item number 1, Amanda Bruce.
All right, so we have a few UDO amendments for you tonight. And the first amendment is a request from the Planning Committee of Town Council to require that a neighborhood meeting be held before a school, public or private, application for a school, private or public school is submitted, whether that's a minor or a major site plan. So currently in the UDO, anything that's a major site plan requires a neighborhood meeting prior to submittal. But if a school does not reach the threshold, which is 100,000 square feet of a major site plan, then under the current rules, it would not. And the town council members felt that it was appropriate to have a neighborhood meeting held for any school use. Any questions on that amendment?
Amanda, this is Tina. I have a question. I appreciate that this is for the school, public or private use. I'm curious as to the possibility of extending it beyond school uses, specifically in regards to minor site plans. I understand that typically minor site plans are for smaller plans that are coming before the town, but I'm particularly concerned about items that may fall out of these two categories or this one category, and would want to hear thoughts on that.
So the process for the designation of what a minor or major site plan is and what those requirements are was reviewed extensively with the Planning Committee of Town Council and the Town Council when the process for major site plans was changed from requiring Town Council approval to requiring staff approval. And at that time, no change to the process for what requires a neighborhood meeting was proposed or discussed at that time. Since that time, the Town Council expressed concerns about the school use, given they're typically close to residential areas and the traffic impact that they can have. And they felt that at least the Planning Committee of Town Council, wanted for a neighborhood meeting to provide more notice to neighbors and chance to provide input to the applicant before the application was submitted. This is an amendment requested by that committee, and so it's being presented as their request.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to have that expanded beyond school, and don't know what the options are, but would like to request that we expand beyond school. I think that neighborhood meetings, when you have an issue that is directly impacting neighbors, especially residential. I understand how school fits into that use, but there may be other uses. I think it's really important to have a neighborhood meeting. And for full disclosure, I myself, as a resident of the town, participated in a special neighborhood meeting for a minor site development, and do not feel that I do not feel that that should have been a special neighborhood meeting. That should have been a neighborhood meeting because the application was, again, butting up against a residential development. For folks who are unaware, it was the Wake County EMS that's being constructed near the fire station off of Kelly Road and Apex Barbecue. And so I think this is an excellent proposal requested by the council, but would request that staff consider expanding it. And again, not knowing what the uses are, I don't know exactly, not knowing the additional public and civic uses there might be, or other uses. I don't know where to begin with that. But I think that, if we're talking about a minor site plan, or a major site plan that is butting up against a residential development, I think it's critical that neighborhood and citizens be able to have a meeting to understand what's coming, what changes are going to impact, understand how that affects their quality of life, and also be able to provide feedback in that.
That could be included as part of a motion, if you would, when the time comes for a motion. But that would affect every. I mean, I'm not certain if you're proposing something now, but staff's not prepared to change the recommendation or the wording at this time. We would need to go back to the planning committee to discuss that.
Amanda, also, we already advertised these for the public hearing on the 22nd, so we can't add them today. So you all can make a recommendation that be studied, but it can't be part of the set of amendments.
Okay, and if that recommendation were studied, would that come back to the planning committee, or would that recommendation come back to the planning board?
It can come back to the planning board, but we typically run things through planning committee as well. But yeah, you all can request amendments come back to you.
Okay, very good. With that, again, I don't know the use types that I would list. So I'm definitely going to make a recommendation as we come out of this, since I would need some help formulating that.
Certainly, and we can talk offline about what your concerns are and how, how it could be crafted, how a change could be drafted.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to be making a recommendation this evening.
And what Diane was saying is we've already advertised that the amendment only applied to this one use, so it would have to come back at a later time as a separate amendment.
Right, I understand, but I will be making a recommendation to study, and would need help in drafting what that would look like. Does that make sense? I'm not making a recommendation to amend this item, but I'll be making a recommendation to study further uses. And I don't know the use types to suggest. There's this is very specific, and I'll be wanting to expand upon that.
So if the full planning board or a majority of the planning board want to make that recommendation, we can add it to the planning board report to town council, just stating that you all want it to be looked at. We don't have to know the specific uses
Okay.
today, but
Okay,
it would
very
need
good.
to be, it would need to be a majority of the planning board.
Understood. Thank you, Diane.
Okay, any other questions on this amendment before we move on? The next amendment is to the Environmental Advisory Board section to strike a reference to the Environmental Committee of Town Council. That committee was dissolved on December 11th of 2021, and so there's no need to have that referenced in the ordinance any longer. And there's also a similar amendment being proposed in the town code, and that amendment will be heard at the same meeting as this one. Any questions on this amendment? The next amendment is to the definition of glass sales to allow for wholesale glass sales in addition to retail sales. We recently discovered that the definition currently only relates to the retail sale, but obviously there are wholesalers and we need to have that opportunity to allow that in our jurisdiction. Any questions on this amendment? Amendment number 4 is to the to allow real wood to be used as a material for the gates of a dumpster enclosure that's associated with a Wake County landmark or other historic structure. Currently, the ordinance prohibits real wood for the use for dumpsters, and we're currently working on a development at a Wake County landmark where in order to be consistent with their certificate of appropriateness, the dumpster gate needs to be real wood and composite wood would not be supported. And so we are proposing that gates constructed of real wood are not permitted unless the dumpster is associated with a Wake County landmark or other historic structure. Any questions on this amendment?
Why doesn't staff like normal or real wood? Is it just a longevity of material?
Exactly. It's usually a long-term maintenance issue and it's not advised as such. And so, but in this case, the actual material matters. And so that's why we're supporting this amendment.
Amanda, Jeff Hastings here. I'm in favor of this, don't get me wrong, but is there a definition of other historic structure? I'm afraid that some places that are not necessarily considered historic are going to try to weasel out of having a much more expensive corral than just by claiming they have a historic structure.
So currently, we rely on properties that are designated as a landmark or that are on our Wake County Historic Resources Survey. And also when we're working on developments, we have Capital Area Preservation is who we contract with to confirm whether a structure is deemed historic or not. So we do ensure that it's an actual historic structure of integrity.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Okay. And then the final amendment is to add a requirement that fully and limited controlled access highway buffers have at least a 20-foot planting area when there's a public utility easement located within that buffer. We currently have that minimum 20-foot planting area requirement for buffers along thoroughfares and collector streets, the street front buffer. But when we made that amendment a couple years ago or so, we left out the fully and limited controlled access highways, which is US 64, 540, US 1. And so without this amendment, the minimum planting area would only be 10 feet wide. And so we are proposing that change today. And also to correct an incorrect section reference within this section. And staff is in support of all of these amendments, and I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Amanda, I do have a question on this amendment. Just thinking if 540, there are stretches along there that are adjacent to like Scott's Mills and the public center where there's a sound barrier wall, would you still have that 20-foot and let's just hypothetically say that there's a sewer easement that's paralleling that wall on the backside. Would you still, in addition to that, need a 20-foot planting? So you'd basically have another 20-foot planting buffer in addition to the wall and the sewer easement. I'm just trying to, it seems like it could be a double taking in certain circumstances. I'm not sure.
So we do allow for utility easements to be located within buffers, and typically, the buffer width is going to vary whether or not we are talking about a residential or non-residential development, or by what the zoning condition may have specified. So as it stands now, you'd only end up with a 10-foot planting area to try to get all of your required plantings in that area. And with these buffers, there's typically a higher planting requirement. And so the 20-foot really provides that better area to meet the planting requirement for this buffer type. And in this case, you're talking about a type A buffer especially for residential development. So for all intents and purposes, you're going to need that width to get your plantings in.
Any other questions for Amanda?
I have a question. If there was a public utility easement, would it be outside of that? It would be 20 foot on the other side of that. Am I correct on that, Amanda?
Yes, because we don't allow plantings within our water and sewer easements. And so for obvious reasons, we want to keep the roots out of those areas. And so this would be outside of the easement.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or a possible motion on all 5 amendments?
This is Tina. I'll make a motion to approve the amendments as presented, with a recommendation that planning staff study expansion of the amendment 1 to include expanded use types beyond school, public or private.
Thank you, Tina. We have a motion from Tina on the UDO amendments. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Keith. We have a motion and a second. We will then move to a vote by roll call. Reggie Skinner, yes. Tina Sherman,
Yes.
Tim Royal,
Yes.
Keith Braswell,
Yes.
Ryan Akers,
Yes.
Elaine Boyle,
Yes.
Stephen Rhodes.
Yes.
That passes unanimously.
So I need to make sure that I captured that correctly. This document is not the easiest. You only can type one line at a time, and when it doesn't go down to the next line, it's just awful. So hang on one second. So Tina, planning board recommends that planning staff study expansion of amendment 1 to require, I didn't have those words in there, but to require additional neighborhood, oh, you had it the other way. Yeah, that doesn't make sense, but okay. To require neighborhood meetings for additional use types. Is that what you wanted?
Yes. And again, I don't know if I've said that right, so if you need me to.
I just wonder if you actually are interested in it for maybe not the use types, but it might be for specific instances. But we can talk about that later. Is Amendment 1 the correct
Yes.
terminology?
Yes, and Diane, I'm just using what what's here on the staff report to as I'm looking at the use table, what's listed as school, public, or private use type. It's under use type, so that's where I'm getting the verbiage. I don't know what all the use types are, so I didn't want to get specific, and I don't think I actually mean in specific instances. I do think it is use type.
Okay, so are you really just talking about minor site plans though? Because I don't see that language in here. That's what I heard when you were talking earlier, because major site plans and subdivisions, Amanda, correct me if I'm wrong, already require the neighborhood meeting.
That's correct. It's just the minor site plans that don't. And Tina, I wasn't sure, you kind of alluded to this, is when the minor site plan is in close proximity to residential uses.
Yes, but what I didn't want to do is, and I don't know if we're going to have to go back and re-amend, what I was trying to do in formulating my motion was stick as close to what you'd had written as possible, as to not confuse things. So minor or major site plan for the use of, and then use types.
Okay, so I have planning board recommends that planning staff study expansion of Amendment 1 to require neighborhood meetings for additional use types.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
And then we can, I think then what happens, right, is you start developing the study, we can wordsmith that, work on that a little more about exactly if there's residential or not, but I was trying to stick to as close as what you had written, what was proposed. Is that good?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay.
All
With
right.
that, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Well, without any other agenda items, I need a motion to adjourn in a second. We have a motion from Tina.
I'll second. Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you, Tim. So we have a motion in a second. Reggie Skinner, yes. Tina Sherman,
Yes.
Tim Royal,
Yes.
Keith Braswell,
Yes.
Ryan Akers,
Yes.
Elaine Boyle,
Yes.
Stephen Rhodes.
Yes.
This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.